Welcome to my channel, Brain Decoded, the space where we unpack how your brain really works and how you can harness that power to become your best self. Today, I'm going to walk you through something that could change how you work, learn, and create how to achieve unstoppable focus using real science-backed neuroscience hacks. If you've ever felt like your attention wavers or that distractions are shouting louder than your goals, you're not alone. And more importantly, your brain is not stuck this way. You can rewire it, train it, and unlock deeper, sharper focus than you ever thought possible. Focus doesn't emerge from willpower alone. Behind our ability to concentrate lies a finely tuned neural orchestra with key players orchestrating alertness, attention, and control. Central to this system is a small but powerful brainstem nucleus known as the locus coeruleus, which releases norepinephrine, a neuromodulator that dramatically shapes how we attend to the world. This release of norepinephrine isn't random, it is precisely regulated, and when the locus coeruleus fires in the right pattern, it fundamentally enhances our capacity for selective, goal-directed attention. When the locus coeruleus activates in fast, phasic bursts, it sends sharp pulses of norepinephrine throughout the brain, especially to the prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of executive control. These bursts don't just broadly elevate arousal. They fine-tune neural circuits in a spatially selective way, heightening sensitivity to relevant sensory inputs. In experiments on non-human primates, when locus coeruleus neurons are artificially activated, for example, via optogenetics, animals become better at discriminating visual stimuli specifically in the quadrant where they are attending without a generalized increase in motor or decision noise. This shows that norepinephrine from the locus coeruleus plays a causal role in increasing perceptual sharpness, not by simply making the brain more chaotic, but by amplifying the neural gain on what truly matters. But the story doesn't end at norepinephrine. The release mechanisms are more nuanced. When locus coeruleus neurons fire in certain patterns, they can co-release dopamine in the prefrontal cortex, a phenomenon shown in rodent studies. This co-release means that the same activation that boosts alertness is also reinforcing working memory circuits, decision-making, and cognitive control. Together, norepinephrine and dopamine provide a synergistic boost. Norepinephrine sharpens and gates, dopamine motivates and stabilizes. The prefrontal cortex, receiving this dual signal, then implements top-down control. But this control is not monolithic. Neuroscientific research has revealed that the locus coeruleus projects to distinct subregions of the prefrontal cortex to drive different aspects of attentional control. One projection targets the dorsomedial PFC, enabling strong, goal-directed focus. Another targets the orbitofrontal cortex, helping suppress impulses. These separable pathways allow the brain to independently manage both sustained attention and impulsivity, which is critical for high-level focus tasks. Moreover, the activity patterns of the locus coeruleus matter. There is evidence for two modes: a phasic mode, where the neurons fire in coordinated bursts, and a tonic mode, where there is steady baseline firing. The phasic mode is strongly associated with effective, selective attention. When the nucleus pulses, our brain enters a laser-focused state. The tonic mode, by contrast, supports a kind of scanning or exploratory attention, which is useful for broader vigilance or flexibility, though not optimal for deep, narrow focus. This architecture positions the locus coeruleus noradrenergic system as a critical regulator, not just of arousal, but of cognitive state switching. It allows the brain to adaptively shift between being wide, open to new information, and deeply locked in on a specific goal. Importantly, the modulation of the prefrontal cortex by norepinephrine and dopamine doesn't just tune moment-to-moment attention. It also influences long-term synaptic changes. The noradrenergic system can support synaptic plasticity, gene transcription, and neural remodeling over time, effectively enabling experience-dependent refinement of attention networks. To really grasp focus, it's not enough to think about neurons firing. You have to understand the dynamic interplay between neuromodulatory systems, norepinephrine, dopamine, cortical control regions, prefrontal cortex, and the temporal patterns of activation. When everything aligns, precisely timed bursts from the locus coeruleus, key targeted release of norepinephrine and dopamine, prefrontal circuits ready to amplify or suppress, you achieve a brain state that is optimally primed for concentration. There's also a behavioral angle. Because the locus coeruleus has such a causal role in both attention and impulse control, its activity can support not just momentary bursts of focus, but sustained cognitive discipline. When LC neurons are stimulated, impulsivity decreases and goal directed behavior increases. This means that focus is not simply the absence of distraction, but the presence of a finely regulated state of readiness and suppression mediated by these precise noradrenergic circuits. In summary, the neural basis of focus is deeply rooted in a network centered on the locus coeruleus, which governs alertness and attentional control via norepinephrine, and, under certain conditions, dopamine. It communicates with the prefrontal cortex along distinct pathways to enable both selective attention and impulse regulation. The pattern of its firing phasic vs tonic determines whether our brain is in a state of intense focus or flexible scanning. And over time, this system drives plastic changes that strengthen our capacity to concentrate. Understanding this neuroarchitecture gives us powerful insight into how focus is not a fixed trait, but a state, one we can influence, train, and optimize. Attention is not a fixed trait. It is a dynamic skill that can be strengthened, shaped, and refined over time. Many people assume that the ability to focus comes naturally or is simply a matter of willpower, but neuroscience tells a different story. Our brains are highly plastic, capable of reorganizing themselves based on experience, practice, and the way we direct our mental energy. This means that attention, far from being a static resource, is a trainable process, and there are precise ways to engage the brain to improve it. At the core of training attention is understanding that the brain has distinct networks that govern different aspects of focus. There is the dorsal attention network, which helps maintain sustained attention on specific goals, and the ventral attention network, which detects new or unexpected stimuli. Training attention involves not only strengthening the circuits responsible for holding focus, but also learning to manage the circuits that respond to distractions. In practical terms, this means deliberately exercising the brain's ability to both lock in and flexibly shift when necessary. One of the most effective methods for attention training is mindfulness or focused attention meditation. This practice involves choosing an object of focus, the breath a sound or a visual anchor, and returning attention to it whenever the mind wanders. The simplicity of this practice belays its power. When the mind drifts, the act of noticing and returning attention strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive control, working memory, and decision-making. Studies have shown that regular engagement in these exercises increases both cortical thickness and connectivity in regions tied to attentional control. Over time, this structural reinforcement translates to an improved ability to maintain focus in everyday tasks, from reading and problem solving to complex, creative work. Another cornerstone of attention training involves structured intervals of work and rest. Techniques like the Pomodoro method, focusing intensely for 25 minutes, followed by a short break, are effective not because the timing is magical, but because they align with the brain's natural rhythms. Neural circuits responsible for sustained attention experience fatigue after prolonged activation. By deliberately incorporating rest, you allow these circuits to recover, strengthening the system rather than depleting it. Repetition of these cycles trains the brain to enter deeper states of concentration while respecting its metabolic and cognitive limits. Visual and sensory attention exercises also play a significant role. For example, fixating on a single point or object for short periods, then gradually extending the duration, engages the neural networks responsible for filtering irrelevant stimuli. The more you practice, the more efficiently these networks inhibit distractions. This ability to suppress irrelevant information is crucial for achieving high-level focus in environments filled with competing sensory input, such as open offices, crowded public spaces, or digital environments flooded with notifications. Attention training is not limited to formal exercises. Everyday activities can be turned into training opportunities by intentionally directing and sustaining focus. When reading a book, for example, one can actively summarize what has been read in one's mind, visualize the content, or teach it to an imaginary audience. These strategies engage working memory, strengthen attentional control, and reinforce the connection between focus and understanding. Even simple acts like slowing down to truly notice sensory details while walking or eating can incrementally enhance attentional capacity over time. Importantly, training attention is as much about understanding limits as it is about building strength. Cognitive fatigue is real, and attempting to push focus beyond its natural capacity without recovery can be counterproductive. Strategic breaks, adequate sleep, and periods of low stimulation rest are essential components of any attention training regimen. These moments allow synaptic circuits to reset and consolidate, ensuring that gains from practice are retained and integrated. Reward structures also enhance attention training. Breaking tasks into smaller chunks and celebrating progress activates dopamine pathways, which are critical for motivation and reinforcement learning. Each small success not only provides a psychological boost, but also strengthens the neural circuits that underpin sustained focus, creating a positive feedback loop between effort, reward, and attention. Finally, consistency is paramount. Neural adaptation occurs gradually. Regular, intentional practice, even in small daily doses, produces measurable improvements. It's not the intensity of occasional extreme effort that shapes attention, but the cumulative effect of repeated, deliberate engagement. Over weeks and months, the brain's attention networks become more resilient, more efficient, and more capable of supporting the kinds of sustained, high-level focus required for professional, creative, and personal success. In essence, attention is a skill rooted in the brain's architecture, but one that is flexible, trainable, and responsive to structured practice. By combining focused exercises, interval-based work, sensory training, strategic rest, and motivational reinforcement, anyone can strengthen their attentional networks. The result is a mind capable of engaging deeply with challenges, filtering out distractions, and performing at a level that once might have seemed impossible. Attention is not a static trait handed to some and denied to others. It is a capacity that can be deliberately cultivated, refined, and mastered through consistent, science-informed practice. Focus is not solely a product of mental effort. It is deeply rooted in biology. The chemical environment of the brain, the state of the body, and even the structure of our daily routines all interact to either enhance or undermine our capacity for attention. Understanding this interplay allows us to design practical strategies that leverage our biology to enter and sustain high performance states. One of the most potent biological levers for focus is physical movement. Exercise, even in short bouts, increases blood flow to the brain, elevates neurotrophic factors such as BDNF, and optimizes neurotransmitter release. Aerobic activity, particularly for 10 to 20 minutes, primes the prefrontal cortex and associated attentional networks, making them more responsive to incoming stimuli. This doesn't require a gym or complicated equipment. A brisk walk, a short run, or even dynamic stretching can trigger these effects. Beyond immediate arousal, regular exercise produces long-term adaptations in neural circuits that support sustained attention and working memory, effectively strengthening the biological infrastructure of focus over time. Another critical biological tool is sleep and structured rest. Attention and cognitive control are profoundly sensitive to sleep quality. During sleep, especially deep non-REM stages, the brain consolidates memory, clears metabolic byproducts, and recalibrates neural circuits, including those underpinning attention. Inadequate sleep impairs the prefrontal cortex's ability to suppress distractions and diminishes the brain's capacity to regulate norepinephrine and dopamine, two key neuromodulators responsible for alertness and motivation. Implementing regular sleep schedules, along with strategic naps or non-sleep deep rest practices like guided relaxation or yoga nidra, can restore attentional circuits and enhance overall cognitive efficiency. These practices act as a biological reset button, allowing the brain to maintain high performance across extended periods of work. Nutrition and neurochemistry are also central. Glucose is the primary energy substrate for neurons, and attentional networks are especially energy hungry. Periodic intake of nutrient-dense foods that provide stable glucose release can prevent attention dips. Additionally, hydration, omega-3 fatty acids, and certain micronutrients, including magnesium, zinc, and B vitamins, support neurotransmitter synthesis and synaptic efficiency. Even brief periods of fasting or time-restricted eating can influence alertness and cognitive clarity, in part by modulating the release of norepinephrine and maintaining mitochondrial efficiency in neurons. Environmental design represents another powerful, yet often overlooked, biological hack. Our sensory inputs directly shape the brain's attentional state. Noise-canceling headphones, neutral or non-distracting visual surroundings, and controlled lighting can significantly reduce the load on the brain's ventral attention network, which is responsible for detecting unexpected stimuli. Background auditory patterns, such as white noise or specific frequency binaural beats, can subtly bias cortical oscillations toward alpha and beta states that are conducive to sustained concentration. These environmental manipulations act as external scaffolding, allowing the brain's biological systems to function with greater efficiency. The timing of activity relative to circadian rhythms also profoundly impacts focus. Hormonal and neuromodulatory cycles dictate fluctuations in alertness. Cortisol levels, for example, peak in the morning and help mobilize attention and energy, whereas melatonin secretion in the evening prepares the brain for rest. Aligning demanding cognitive work with periods of natural peak alertness and reserving routine or low attention tasks for TROs allows the brain to operate in sync with its biological rhythms, reducing fatigue and improving sustained performance. Another critical aspect is the role of reward and motivation circuits. Dopamine, the neuromodulator most associated with motivation, operates as a signal of salience and reward expectation. Structuring tasks into small, achievable goals with immediate feedback or reinforcement creates dopamine surges that enhance both focus and persistence. These micro rewards do not just improve mood, they directly strengthen synaptic connections in circuits associated with attention and task engagement. Over time, this creates a self-reinforcing biological system in which attentional effort becomes both easier and more rewarding. Finally, breath and autonomic regulation provide a rapid, underutilized pathway to influence focus. Slow, deliberate breathing, particularly with extended exhalation, modulates the autonomic nervous system, balancing sympathetic arousal and parasympathetic relaxation. This regulation influences the locus coeruleus norepinephrine system, enabling the brain to sustain attention without becoming overwhelmed by stress or hyperarousal. Even brief sessions of controlled breathing can enhance neural gain in prefrontal circuits, sharpening mental clarity within minutes. In essence, biological hacks for focus operate across multiple levels: the neural, chemical, systemic, and environmental. By strategically engaging movement, rest, nutrition, environmental cues, circadian timing, reward circuits, and autonomic regulation, we can create a brain state optimized for sustained attention and cognitive performance. Focus is not simply a matter of forcing the mind to try harder. It is a state that emerges from aligning behavior, physiology, and environment. When these elements are leveraged consciously, attention becomes not just achievable, but unshakable, resilient, and highly productive. Understanding these biological levers and implementing them consistently allows anyone to enter the mental states necessary for deep work, creativity, and achievement. Sustaining high levels of focus is not simply about willpower or motivation. It is about understanding and aligning with the brain's natural rhythms, capacities, and recovery processes. Attention operates within a dynamic system that balances arousal, reward, fatigue, and cognitive control, and the ability to maintain focus over time depends on optimizing each of these elements. One of the most fundamental principles is recognizing that the brain is not designed to maintain continuous, unbroken attention indefinitely. Neural circuits responsible for sustained attention, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, experience fatigue after prolonged activation, a phenomenon known as directed attention fatigue. Pushing past this point without recovery does not produce more focus, it diminishes performance and increases errors, irritability, and cognitive load. To sustain focus over extended periods, it is critical to leverage natural ultradian rhythms. These are cycles of heightened and reduced alertness that typically occur in intervals of approximately 90 to 120 minutes. During the high phase, attentional networks are primed for deep, goal-directed work. During the low phase, the brain requires rest, lighter cognitive tasks, or restorative activity. Structuring work around these cycles ensures that the brain operates in sync with its intrinsic oscillatory patterns, preventing depletion and allowing periods of high-intensity focus to be genuinely productive. Ignoring these rhythms is often why people experience mental fatigue despite short periods of task engagement. Recovery itself is as essential as activation. High-focus periods should be punctuated by breaks that allow both cortical and subcortical circuits to reset. Non-sleep deep rest to NSDR techniques, such as guided relaxation, yoga nidra, or even brief meditative pauses, facilitate neural recovery and consolidate gains in attention. These moments are not passive. They actively reinforce the efficiency of neural pathways involved in concentration, making subsequent periods of focus more sustainable. Similarly, micro breaks involving light movement, stretching, or sensory resets help to restore blood flow, oxygenation, and neurotransmitter balance, all of which support continued attentional capacity. Another critical element is the management of motivation and reward systems over time. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and salience, is central to sustaining effortful attention. When tasks are lengthy or monotonous, dopamine levels naturally wane, which can cause the mind to drift toward distractions. One solution is to break work into smaller, clearly defined goals with immediate feedback or tangible progress markers. Each achievement, no matter how small, triggers a dopamine release that reinforces engagement. Over time, this creates a positive feedback loop where attentional effort becomes biologically rewarding, making high focus self-sustaining rather than forced. Environmental factors also play a significant role in maintaining attention. Sensory and contextual cues can either support or undermine focus. Environments that are cluttered, noisy, or visually distracting constantly recruit the ventral attention network, which detects novelty and interrupts goal-directed focus. Designing spaces to minimize unnecessary stimuli through neutral lighting, controlled soundscapes, and organized work areas reduces extraneous cognitive load. Even small adjustments, like using headphones to filter background noise or strategically placing objects to cue attention toward task-relevant information, can extend the duration of high focus. Sleep and circadian alignment remain foundational. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive control and sustained attention, is highly sensitive to sleep deprivation. Even a single night of insufficient sleep impairs working memory, inhibitory control, and task persistence. Beyond nightly rest, attention can also be supported by aligning cognitively demanding work with periods of peak circadian alertness. For most individuals, this coincides with mid-morning or early afternoon hours, though there is individual variation. Respecting these biological windows prevents unnecessary strain on attentional networks and enhances the consistency of focus. Autonomic regulation provides another mechanism to sustain focus. Breath control, heart rate variability exercises, and brief mindfulness practices modulate sympathetic and parasympathetic activity, reducing stress-induced fluctuations in norepinephrine. By maintaining the optimal balance of arousal, these practices prevent hyperactivation that leads to anxiety or distraction and hypoactivation that leads to drowsiness. This allows attentional networks to operate in an ideal physiological range, supporting steady, long-term concentration. Finally, mental strategies such as externalizing distractions and creating structured cognitive scaffolds enhance sustained focus. Writing down intrusive thoughts, reminders, or pending tasks prevents them from monopolizing working memory. Pre-planning task sequences and visualizing work sessions reduces the cognitive load associated with decision-making during attention-intensive tasks. These strategies do not increase focus per se, rather, they protect the brain's attentional capacity, allowing it to be applied more effectively over longer periods. In sum, sustaining high focus over time requires a systems-level approach that integrates activation, recovery, motivation, environment, circadian rhythms, and autonomic regulation. Performance attention is a balance of engaging and restoring neural circuits, aligning behavior with biology, and continuously reinforcing motivation through meaningful feedback. By respecting the brain's inherent limitations and leveraging its natural rhythms, anyone can maintain deep, resilient focus over hours, days, and weeks. Focus is not a static state. It is a dynamic interplay between effort, biology, and environment, and mastering this interplay is the key to sustained cognitive performance. So, to recap, your brain is not a fixed machine. It's a dynamic system wired for change. By understanding how your attention networks work, by training focus like a muscle, and by using practical neuroscience-backed hacks, you can unlock a level of mental clarity and sustained concentration that most people only dream of. If you start applying these tools, movement, rest, attention training, environmental design, consistently, you will not just see short-term improvements, you will rewire your brain. And that rewiring is the foundation of unstoppable focus. Thank you for joining me on Brain Decoded. If you found value in this, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which neuroscience hack are you going to try first. Stay curious, stay focused, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll decode more of your incredible brain.